Ever walked into a room and instantly felt like something was off, not because of what's being said, but because of what's not? Picture this. You're at a dinner party. The clink of glasses, the low hum of conversation, and bursts of laughter fill the air. Everyone's comfortably nodding along to the same recycled stories, echoing familiar opinions, like a chorus of polite approval. It's all so safe. Then suddenly, someone breaks the rhythm. They say something sharp, something real, an insight that slices clean through the noise like a lightning bolt across a clear sky. And just like that, the atmosphere changes. The laughter fades. The room goes still. Not in awe, but discomfort. People glance around, shift in their seats, reach for their phones, anything to avoid meeting eyes. What just happened? You've just seen one of society's oldest, most deep-rooted fears play out right before your eyes. The fear of intellect, not intelligence in the academic sense, but the raw, unfiltered kind that sees the world not as it pretends to be, but as it is. This isn't a quirk of modern culture or a side effect of social media overload. No, this reaction has been baked into society for centuries. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer knew this all too well. He wasn't one to soften the truth. Over 200 years ago, he pointed out a dynamic that still echoes today. Society doesn't fear intelligent people because they're too smart to handle. It fears them because they see too much. They hold up a mirror that reflects everything we try so hard to hide: our hypocrisies, our self-deceptions, our carefully constructed illusions. Let's be honest. When was the last time you heard someone say, "I just love hanging out with people who challenge everything I believe"? Exactly. It rarely happens. We don't crave uncomfortable truths. We cling to comforting lies. Schopenhauer understood this human tendency well. He wrote of how most people exist inside what he called the world of appearances, a fabricated, fragile reality designed to keep our beliefs unchallenged, our choices unquestioned, and our egos intact. But truly intelligent people, they don't play along. They can't. They're natural-born bubble poppers. They spot the cracks in the illusion, the inconsistencies in the narrative. They're the ones who notice when the emperor has no clothes. And worse, they say it out loud in society. Well, society would rather the emperor remain fully dressed. Thank you very much. Now, let me paint you a slightly different picture. You're watching a movie with friends. It's got all the feel-good ingredients. A plucky underdog, a dream pursued, a neat resolution tied with a bow. Everyone's into it, smiling, relaxed, enjoying the fantasy, but not you. Your mind catches the lazy dialogue, the paper-thin characters. It's the fairy tale ending that ignores every harsh truth about real life. So, do you speak up? Do you ruin the mood by pointing out what everyone else is pretending not to notice? This, right here, is the daily dilemma of the intelligent. Not because they want to ruin the moment, but because their minds won't let them stay silent. They can't unsee the gaps. They can't unfeel the dissonance between the stories we tell and the reality we live in. It's not cynicism. It's clarity. Schopenhauer had a name for this exhausting awareness: the burden of consciousness, and for those who carry it. Every room, every conversation, every story comes with the quiet weight of knowing too much, the fear of someone who sees what others refuse to see. The more aware you become, the more isolated you feel from those who choose to remain unaware. It's a subtle shift, at first barely noticeable, but over time it becomes impossible to ignore. Imagine you're at a lively party where everyone's dancing to music only they can hear. Laughter echoes, people move with ease, but to you, it all starts to look surreal. Like being the only sober person in a room full of drunk guests. You begin to see through the chaos, and suddenly nothing feels real anymore. Everything that once made sense now seems absurd. Conversations feel scripted, smiles look forced. You speak, but it's as if you're speaking an entirely different language no one understands, or wants to. And this is exactly where society begins to get nervous. Because if intelligent people are right, if their awareness has led them to truths that sit quietly beneath our well-worn social scripts and delusions, then what does that mean for everyone else? What does that say about the elaborate lives we've built on top of those very delusions? Let's dig into that discomfort, the threat of independent thinking. It's not just some philosophical concept. It's a real and present fear woven deep into the fabric of how society operates. Because society, at its core, is built on collective agreements. We all silently agree that a slip of printed paper has value, so we call it money. We agree that invisible lines across landmasses define nations, so we call them borders. We agree that certain rituals and behaviors make sense, so we call them normal. These agreements form the structure of everyday life. But what happens when someone refuses to play along? What happens when someone pauses and says, "Wait, none of this actually makes sense"? When they begin asking the dangerous questions, why do we spend decades working in jobs that drain us, just to buy things we don't need to impress people we barely know? Why do we accept that some individuals hoard billions while others struggle to afford basic human rights like healthcare? Why do we convince ourselves that blending in is better than thinking for ourselves? Suddenly, the seemingly stable foundation begins to crack. Those long-standing agreements that shaped our sense of security start to feel unstable. And the people whose identities are built entirely on those agreements, they panic, resist, they push back. Not because they're evil or malicious, but because change is terrifying when your whole world is built on comfort and conformity. Schopenhauer saw this dynamic with piercing clarity. He understood that most people don't really seek truth. What they want is comfort. It's not growth, but reassurance. Not to be challenged, but to be agreed with. And intelligent individuals, by their very nature, threaten all of that. Not because they attack directly, but because their mere presence invites reflection. Their silence becomes a mirror, and their thoughts become a spotlight. This leads us into something Schopenhauer found both fascinating and unsettling: the psychology of intellectual intimidation. People, he observed, often react to intelligence the same way they react to a physical threat. Their fight-or-flight response is activated not metaphorically, but quite literally. They might lash out, ridiculing, dismissing, even vilifying the intelligent person. Or they might retreat, void them, exclude them, make them the outsider. But the question remains, why such a strong reaction? Why do ideas' mere thoughts provoke the same emotional response as a threat to one's physical safety? Because challenging someone's deeply held worldview is far more personal than it seems. It's not just about ideas. It's about identity. To question someone's beliefs is, in many ways, to question who they are, the choices they've made, the values they hold dear, and the foundation on which their entire sense of self rests. Think about it. When was the last time someone genuinely challenged a belief you hold close? Not just debated a topic, but truly made you stop and reconsider something at your core. How did that feel? If you're honest, it probably didn't feel good. Maybe your heart raced. Maybe your stomach tightened. That's not just discomfort. That's your ego in self-defense mode. And that's the cost of awareness. Because the more aware you become, the more isolated you feel from those who choose to remain unaware. You might have felt defensive, angry, even personally attacked. That emotional surge, that tight chest, the spike in heart rate, the urge to defend your point even before fully listening, it's not unfamiliar. Now imagine feeling like that every single time you engage with certain individuals. People who don't just repeat what they've heard but dig deeper, challenge assumptions, and ask questions that others carefully avoid. That's the effect. Deeply reflective, openly questioning individuals often have on those around them. It's exhausting. It's uncomfortable. And frankly, for many, it's just easier to avoid them altogether. And here's where society's quiet cruelty begins to show its true face. Instead of acknowledging the unease that intelligence stirs, in them, many people unconsciously build narratives to defend their discomfort. Rather than admit they feel intellectually insecure, they twist the story. They think they're better than everyone. They're just trying to show off. They're too intense, too negative. They analyze everything to death. Sound familiar? These aren't genuine critiques of intelligent behavior. They're defense mechanisms, psychological armor meant to protect fragile egos from the discomfort of feeling intellectually outmatched. People rarely realize they're doing it, but the goal is the same: reduce the threat by labeling it. Schopenhauer didn't just recognize this behavior, he lived it. For much of his life, he watched as his most profound ideas were misunderstood, ignored, or outright rejected. His masterwork, The World as Will and Representation, struggled to gain any traction when first published. It sold poorly. The academic elite brushed him aside. The broader public barely knew his name. Why? Because he spoke truths people didn't want to hear. He stripped away romantic illusions about human behavior and showed us the uncomfortable reality beneath. He revealed that much of our behavior, our ambitions, our affections, even our moral posturing isn't guided by rational thought, but by unconscious drives, fears, and deeply rooted biological impulses. He argued that much of what we call love is driven not by soul-stirring passion, but evolutionary instinct. He questioned the idea of free will itself, suggesting that much of what we think we choose is actually predetermined by forces, which we barely understand, and people hated that. They didn't want to believe in a world of raw impulses and illusionary autonomy. They wanted hope, heroism, and narratives where love conquers all. They wanted to believe in moral progress and personal empowerment. But Schopenhauer's ideas threatened those comforting myths. He didn't share them out of malice or superiority, far from it. He believed truth, even when painful, was more valuable than any beautifully wrapped lie. But a society that runs on beautiful lies doesn't easily forgive the ones who speak painful truths. Now let's fast forward to today. Social media, with its infinite scroll and dopamine-driven feedback loops, has amplified everything Schopenhauer once observed about intelligence in society. Instead of pushing thoughtful voices to the forefront, the digital age often sidelines them. The loudest voices, the ones offering quick takes, black and white answers, and viral outrage, rise to the top. Meanwhile, intelligent thinkers who speak with nuance, who ask for reflection, who resist extremes, are drowned out. They're labeled elitist, pretentious, out of touch. What we're left with is the intellectual equivalent of junk food easily consumed. Instantly gratifying, but nutritionally empty. It fills the feed, but starves the mind. And when someone tries to point this out, when they ask for a richer, more thoughtful conversation, they're mocked or dismissed. Here's something Schopenhauer deeply understood, something we're only now beginning to grasp. Intelligence can be profoundly isolating. Not because intelligent people prefer isolation, but because real connection requires mutual depth, a shared language of thought, curiosity, and perception. And when you see the world through a lens that most people never think to pick up, when you're disturbed by things others ignore, when your mind walks paths others don't even notice, connection becomes a much rarer thing. And that's the quiet cost of awareness. You might have felt defensive, angry, even personally attacked. It's like being fluent in a language that few people speak. You can make small talk. You can nod at the weather, smile at jokes you don't find funny, and ask the expected questions at the expected times. You know how to participate in the performance. When it comes to the conversations that matter, the ones that brush up against meaning, purpose, or truth, you suddenly find yourself lost in translation. It's not that you don't know how to speak. It's that few people want to hear what you actually have to say. So what do? You adapt. You edit. You reduce the complex thoughts swirling in your mind into watered-down versions that others might tolerate. You end up feeling like you're performing a version of yourself that others can accept, while your authentic self remains hidden, not out of pride, but out of necessity. This feeling isn't born from arrogance or any sense of superiority. It's the quiet ache of wanting to be understood, but repeatedly feeling misunderstood. It's the mental exhaustion that comes from constantly translating your ideas into safer, more digestible pieces, filtering your truth so it won't trigger discomfort in others. And still, despite all that effort, society looks at this self-editing and misreads it entirely. It sees restraint and calls it aloofness. It sees a preference for solitude and labels it antisocial. It sees quiet observation and names it pretension. But what's really happening beneath the surface is far more human and vulnerable. The fear of being exposed. Let's peel back another layer. Why do intelligent people often trigger such strong emotional reactions in others? It comes down to something very primal: the fear of being seen, really deeply seen. Most of us spend years crafting personas. We wear the right clothes, we say the right things, we smile when expected. We curate our online selves like digital storefronts. We do it not out of deceit, but survival. It feels safer to present a polished version of who we are rather than risk showing our raw, uncertain selves. But intelligent people, they tend to see through it all. Not because they're trying to tear anyone down, but because their minds are wired to spot patterns, contradictions, subtle signals. They pick up on inconsistencies when someone's words don't quite match their body language, when a smile hides discomfort, when ambition masks insecurity. They instinctively look deeper without even meaning to. And for many, being around that kind of perception feels like standing under a spotlight with nowhere to hide. We feel exposed, vulnerable, seen in ways we're not prepared to be, and that feeling, being unmasked, even silently, can be terrifying. So we protect ourselves the only way we know how. We create distance. We build walls. We convince ourselves that they're the problem, that they're too intense, too critical, too serious, too much. We make them the villain not because they've harmed us, but because they've seen too much of us. The rebellion against mediocrity. Schopenhauer, ever the uncompromising observer of human nature, saw this with chilling clarity. He believed that most people live lives of quiet desperation, going through familiar motions, sticking to well-worn paths, and never really pausing to ask why. We follow inherited scripts, pursue society's definitions of success, chase dreams we didn't choose. We call this normal. We call this life. But intelligent people pose a silent challenge to all of that. They are a rebellion, not a loud, boastful one, but a quiet, necessary one. A rebellion against sleepwalking through existence. They ask questions that sound simple but are anything but. What if there's more to life than this? What if we've been following the wrong script all along? What if happiness isn't about collecting more things or gaining more status? These are the questions most people avoid because they threaten to reveal uncomfortable answers. Answers that suggest we've been chasing empty goals, buying into illusions and mistaking routine for meaning. Answers that hint that our entire lives may be built on foundations that don't actually nourish us. And that realization, if fully accepted, could change everything. But not everyone is ready for that change. It's like being fluent in a language that few people speak. You can make small talk. You can nod at the weather, smile at jokes you don't find funny, and ask the expected questions. At the expected times, you know how to participate in the performance. But when it comes to the conversations that matter, the ones that brush up against meaning, purpose, or truth, you suddenly find yourself lost in translation. It's not that you don't know how to speak. It's that few people want to hear what you actually have to say. So what do? You adapt. You edit. You reduce the complex thoughts swirling in your mind into watered-down versions that others might tolerate. You end up feeling like you're performing a version of yourself that others can accept, while your authentic self remains hidden, not out of pride, but out of necessity. This feeling isn't born from arrogance or any sense of superiority. It's the quiet ache of wanting to be understood, but repeatedly feeling misunderstood. It's the mental exhaustion that comes from constantly translating your ideas into safer, more digestible pieces, filtering your truth so it won't trigger discomfort in others. And still, despite all that effort, society looks at this self-editing and misreads it entirely. It sees restraint and calls it aloofness, sees a preference for solitude and labels it antisocial, sees quiet observation and names it pretension. But what's really happening beneath the surface is far more human and vulnerable. The fear of being exposed. Let's peel back another layer. Why do intelligent people often trigger such strong emotional reactions in others? It comes down to something very primal. The fear of being seen, really deeply seen. Most of us spend years crafting personas. We wear the right clothes. We say the right things. We smile when expected. We curate our online selves like digital storefronts. We do it not out of deceit, but survival. It feels safer to present a polished version of who we are rather than risk showing our raw, uncertain selves. But intelligent people? They tend to see through it all, not because they're trying to tear anyone down, but because their minds are wired to spot patterns, contradictions, subtle signals. They pick up on inconsistencies when someone's words don't quite match their body language, when a smile hides discomfort, when ambition masks insecurity. They instinctively look deeper, without even meaning to, and for many, being around. That kind of perception feels like standing under a spotlight with nowhere to hide. We feel exposed, vulnerable, seen in ways we're not prepared to be, and that feeling being unmasked, even silently, can be terrifying. So we protect ourselves, the only way we know how. We create distance. We build walls, convince ourselves that they're the problem, that they're too intense, too critical, too serious, too much. We make them the villain not because they've harmed us, because they've seen too much of us. The rebellion against mediocrity. Schopenhauer, ever the uncompromising observer of human nature, saw this with chilling clarity. He believed that most people live lives of quiet desperation, going through familiar motions, sticking to well-worn paths, and never really pausing to ask why. We follow inherited scripts, pursue society's definitions of success, chase dreams we didn't choose. We call this normal, call this life. But intelligent people pose a silent challenge to all of that. They are a rebellion, not a loud, boastful one, but a quiet, necessary one. A rebellion against sleepwalking through existence. They ask questions that sound simple, but are anything but. What if there's more to life than this? What if we've been following the wrong script all along? What if happiness isn't about collecting more things or gaining more status? These are the questions most people avoid, because they threaten to reveal uncomfortable answers. Answers that suggest we've been chasing empty goals, buying into illusions and mistaking routine for meaning. Answers that hint that our entire lives may be built on foundations that don't actually nourish us. And that realization, if fully accepted, could change everything. But not everyone is ready for that change. It's like being fluent in a language that few people speak. And if that's true, if intelligent people are right about the emptiness of conventional success, then what does that say about all the time and energy we've invested in pursuing it? What does it reveal about the decades spent chasing promotions, collecting achievements, curating perfect lives for public display, only to discover that beneath the surface, it feels hollow? The realization can be deeply unsettling. No one wants to believe they've been climbing the wrong ladder, but intelligent individuals dare to face that possibility, the courage to stand alone. This is perhaps what I admire most. In truly intelligent people, not just their ideas, but their unwavering commitment to those ideas. They're willing to stand alone with their convictions, even when it costs them popularity, belonging, or peace. While most people bend their truth for approval or silence their doubts for the sake of harmony, the intelligent hold firm. Not because they enjoy isolation, but because they won't compromise their integrity for social comfort. This isn't stubbornness. It's not pride disguised as principle. It's moral courage. The quiet but powerful belief that some things carry greater weight than acceptance, that truth matters more than comfort, that authenticity matters more than approval. Yet society doesn't often see it that way. Instead, this conviction is misread. Their refusal to conform gets labeled as arrogance. Their independence, framed as rejection of community. Their introspection, mistaken for aloofness. We interpret their principles as judgment, as if their choices condemn our compromises. And that's where the misunderstanding begins. This creates a cycle, one that's both tragic and familiar. Intelligent people feel misunderstood, so they retreat. They go quiet. They stop engaging in shallow conversations, not out of bitterness, but because the depth they crave just isn't there. And society, seeing this withdrawal, takes it as confirmation. See? They don't want to connect. They think they're better. The distance grows. The assumptions harden. The walls on both sides get taller. But here's what often gets missed. Despite all the resistance they face, intelligent people offer something profoundly valuable to society. They are our conscience. They are the uncomfortable reminder that we can do better, that we should do better. They're the ones who speak up when no one else will. They're the ones who point out, often at great personal cost, that the emperor has no clothes when everyone else is too polite, too afraid, or too indifferent to say a word. They challenge our easy answers. They resist shallow thinking. Ask the hard questions we've been avoiding. They refuse to let comfort become a substitute for truth, or routine a replacement for meaning. And yes, their honesty can sting. But in that sting is the seed of growth. This is a gift, not a curse. But like many gifts that demand something of us, awareness, accountability, change, it's one we often reject. We cling to illusions that shield us from discomfort, even if they also shield us from progress. Schopenhauer understood this intimately. He knew that those who speak hard truths often go unrecognized, or worse, are vilified in their own time. He saw that societies prefer beautiful lies over difficult truths, and that comfort often triumphs over clarity. But he also knew something deeper, that real progress only happens when someone is brave enough to see clearly and speak honestly about what they see and what this means for you. Yes, you're someone who thinks deeply, questions boldly, and sees things others don't. This is for you. Your intelligence is not a flaw. Your questions are not problems. Your clarity, your perspective, your quiet rebellion against the shallow. None of it needs to be softened to be accepted. Society's discomfort with intelligence says more about society than it does about you. But here's the truth, and it matters. You don't have to choose between intelligence and connection. You don't have to silence your insight to be loved. You don't have to hide your depth just to be welcomed at the surface. What you need to find are the people who appreciate depth, who value authenticity, who aren't threatened by someone who thinks differently. They exist. It might not always be easy to find, but they're out there, quiet, thoughtful, just like we, probably feeling just as alone, just as unseen, wondering if anyone else views the world the way they do. They're looking too, waiting for someone to speak the language they thought only existed in their own mind. Schopenhauer believed that consciousness was both a burden and a gift, and that paradox still rings true. The burden lies in the solitude it often brings, the quiet weight of always seeing one layer deeper, noticing things others miss or choose to ignore. It's the loneliness of being awake in a room full of sleepwalkers, of caring deeply in a world that often rewards indifference. It's not easy. But then there's the gift, the beauty of a rich inner world, the depth of understanding, the ability to find meaning where others only see noise. Experience awe in silence and insight in simplicity. To see beauty not in perfection, but in nuance. The ability to reflect, to feel, to recognize life's complexity that is a profound gift. Even when it feels isolating, the key then is learning to carry both with grace. To understand that you may never be fully understood by the masses, and that's okay. It means accepting your difference, not as a curse, but as part of your design. It means honoring your awareness, even when it distances you from the crowd. And it also means learning to use your intelligence not as a shield to protect yourself, or as a sword to cut others down, but as a bridge to those who are ready for real connection. Not everyone is, but someone is. Let me make something very clear. The world doesn't just benefit from thinkers, questioners, and truth seekers. It depends on them. We need those brave enough to challenge the stories we've told ourselves for centuries. We need people who don't settle for surface level answers, who keep digging until they reach something real. Society may resist intelligence, it may mock or marginalize it, but at its core, it relies on it to move forward. Every major breakthrough, every shift in history, every real step forward in humanity's journey has come from someone who thought differently, who saw the cracks others ignored, who asked the questions others were afraid to voice. It's that spark of insight, the one that may now feel like a burden, isn't just your gift. It's your responsibility. Your intelligence isn't something you need to downplay or hide. It's something to refine and use with compassion. not arrogance. With patience, not frustration. You're not here to shame those who don't yet. So you're here to help light the path for when they're ready to look. Arthur. Schopenhauer spent much of his life being misunderstood. His work was ignored, rejected, dismissed, sometimes mocked. But time had the final say. The truths he revealed, the insights he offered into human nature, the unconscious, the illusions of free will, all of it became the foundation of ideas that now shape its modern psychology and philosophy. His work would eventually influence Freud. It would inspire Jung. His reflections on suffering and human desire would ripple through generations. The world eventually caught up to his intelligence, and it will catch up to yours too, in your own time. In your own way, the insights that make others uncomfortable today may very well be the wisdom that helps them tomorrow. The questions that make people squirm now might become the very answers that set them free later. Society's fear of intelligence is really society's fear of growth, of change, of having to examine itself honestly. It's not intelligence itself that disturbs people, it's what that intelligence demands. It asks uncomfortable questions. It challenges long-held assumptions, forces us to reflect, to admit what we don't know, and to confront the ways we may be complicit in our own limitations. And that's terrifying for a world built on comfort, appearances, and routine. But here's the truth. Growth is inevitable. Change is constant. You can delay it, deny it, resist it, but you cannot stop it. An honest self-examination? That's not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's the only way forward, the only road that leads to anything real. Every meaningful step in human progress, whether in science, ethics, or philosophy, has come from the courage to look inward and question everything. Your intelligence is part of that path. Your questions, no matter how uncomfortable, are part of that journey. Your unwillingness to settle for beautiful lies is part of humanity's long, painful, but vital evolution toward greater awareness. And that makes you more important than you realize. Not because you have all the answers, but because you insist on asking the right questions. Don't let society's fear dim your light. The world may try to convince you that thinking deeply is a flaw, that feeling too much or noticing too much is a weakness. But it's not. It's a strength. And the world needs that strength now more than ever. If this resonated with you, if you felt even a flicker of recognition, like someone finally put words to a truth you've carried quietly for years, then you're exactly the kind of person this message is meant for. You're not broken for seeing the world differently. You're needed. Don't let society's discomfort with depth make you shallow. Don't trade authenticity for approval. Don't silence your thoughts just because they unsettle those who refuse to think. And most of all, don't let their fear of questions make you stop asking. The world becomes clearer, stronger, more honest every time someone like you chooses to speak up. So, if you've ever felt misunderstood for thinking too deeply, hit that like button. Not for me, for you. For the part of you that refuses to shrink just to fit into a simpler narrative, and share this with someone who needs it. Someone who's been quietly wondering if they're the only one who sees through the noise. Because intelligence isn't the problem. The fear of intelligence is, and maybe, just maybe, it's time we stop being afraid of thinking clearly about what really matters.